In this video I will show you everything you need to know about 9 Kings. The game looks simple at first glance. You place troops and turrets and hope they can defeat the upcoming wave. But the further you get, the more you realize that that's just not enough. I've beaten the game multiple times on the hardest difficulty, and in this video I will show you all the tips and tricks I discovered myself and found on the internet. These are useful tips for people who have just started playing, but also helpful tricks for experienced players. So let's get started and see for yourself. The correct placement of your castle can be the difference between victory and defeat. Always position it as far back as possible. This forces enemies to take a significantly longer path to reach and destroy it, giving your towers extra time to eliminate remaining opponents. I've had so many runs where the last enemy fell just in front of my castle at the very last second, and that extra distance made all the difference. Also, don't just place it at the back, place it in the center of the back row. This way you have 3 adjacent tiles for buff buildings instead of just 2, which is all you'd get if the castle was in a corner. With placing your castle, you also unlock the king's ability. This is one of the most powerful tools in the early game, and sometimes even in the late game. Activating automatic targeting feels super convenient because it lets you play almost hands-free. But here's the catch: convenience can cost you the victory. By default, auto-targeting always goes for the closest enemy. Sounds fine, right? Well, not really. The real threats, the high damage units with low HP, usually sit in the back row. If you keep hitting the tanks in the front, you will lose your front line fast. That's why switching to manual targeting in tough rounds can completely change the outcome. A few well-placed shots can wipe out those damage dealers and keep your army alive. Don't waste your gold early on. It's a trap a lot of players fall into. There are plenty of ways to spend your cash, but not all of them are worth it. Instead, save up for your first decree. That's where the real power comes from. Once decrees become available, throw everything you've got into getting the best ones. The first priority should be overwork. This is by far the best decree and allows you to scale quickly early on. But keep in mind that some decrees, such as overwork, cannot be chosen an infinite number of times. Overwork itself is limited to 2 times. Now that we've covered the basics, let's get into what really matters. How do you actually win? No matter which king you play, you have a ton of options when it comes to troops, towers and buff buildings. But here's the truth: placing things randomly without a plan won't get you far. Most of the time, the smartest strategy is to focus on one troop type and buff it as much as possible. Place this unit in the front center so it can receive buffs from 3 and later even 4 sides. You can then add other troops or towers in those spots if needed. They'll get the buffs too. Which buffs you choose really depends on the troop. For example, placing a farm next to mercenaries is pointless, because their troop count only scales with gold. But putting damage buffs next to a paladin is perfect, since every point of damage also increases their health. So always think about which buffs make the most sense for your chosen unit and upgrade that one as much as possible. This applies to towers too. Some towers become insanely powerful when properly improved. Now that you know which cards are the strongest, the next question is, how do you actually get them? The cards you see come from a shared pool, made up of your own king's card and the cards of the kings you're currently fighting. For example, if you're playing as the king of nothing and your enemies are blood and progress, your card pool will include nothing, blood and progress as cards. So here's the trick. When you declare war, choose the king whose cards you need for your build. This gives you the best chance of getting the upgrades and buffs that matter the most. Some of the most important buff buildings come from specific kings. Attack speed from the king of greed, damage and troop count from the king of nothing, health from the king of nature, spell multiplication from the king of spells, and one of my favorite cards, the tower damage buff from the king of stone. That last one is insanely powerful if you're planning a turret or castle focused strategy, as it buffs all the towers and not only adjacent ones. So always plan ahead, figure out which buffs will give you the biggest advantage, and start the right war accordingly. By the way, if you enjoy indie games like this one, you should definitely check out Humble Bundle. It's a site where you can grab curated bundles of awesome indie games for way less than full price. The best part? You decide how much you want to pay, and a portion even goes to charity. Just check out the link in the description. It supports the channel and might get you some great games for cheap. In addition to buff buildings, there are also tomes and enchantments that can make your troops significantly stronger. Tomes are powerful one-time spells that provide unique benefits. Some of the best ones are Offering, which destroys a target plot to give you 3 random tome cards, Overinvestment, which spends 30 gold to boost every stat of a troop or tower by 15%, and Procreate, which adds 9 units to a selected troop. Enchantments work differently. They are applied directly to your troops, giving them permanent improvements. You can even boost these further with a library. My personal favorites are Steel Coat, which blocks the first hit a unit would take in every battle, and Carnage, which makes the unit explode on death, dealing 10% of its HP as area damage. Here's the bonus tip. Be careful with your tomes. Some of them only work under specific conditions and the game won't warn you or refund the card if it fails. For example, take Migration. This card moves the troop to an empty adjacent plot and grants plus 10% damage and HP. Sounds great, but if there's no empty space next to your troop, the card is used up and the round ends with no effect. So always double check the conditions before playing these tomes. If you play 9 kings for a while, you will eventually unlock new kings. And it's a good idea to play all of them at least a little in the beginning, for several reasons. First, you need to see, understand and try out every card available. Why? Because in theory, you can draw any card in any round. So how can you know which cards work best for your current situation, or which king to attack, if you don't even know what they all do? On top of that, playing different kings is the fastest way to unlock a bunch of new perks for your meta progression. And that brings us to the next tip. There are currently 78 perks in the game, divided into 3 types: Universal perks, King perks and Rainbow perks. Universal and Rainbow perks can be equipped by any king, while King perks are exclusive to the king that unlocked them. The unlock order follows a very specific pattern. Each time a king levels up, you unlock at least one perk. The game alternates between Universal and King perks, until you've collected all 11 Universal perks. After that, every level up will only grant King perks. Rainbow perks on the other hand work differently. They don't replace your normal perk reward, they're added on top. You will unlock a Rainbow perk at levels 3, 6, 9 and 12 the first time any king reaches those levels. These perks are extremely powerful because they can multiply and enhance the effects of your existing perks. That's why it makes sense to play every king a little at first, to learn their cards and unlock some basic perks, and then focus on one king and push at least to level 9 or 12 for those game-changing rainbow perks. When it comes to optimal rainbow perk placement, here are 2 of my favorite setups. The Triple Nationalist, which lets you 4x 3 king perks, and the expensive Generalist, which uses max slots with 1 triple universal perk and 3 double king perks. Which one you pick depends on your playstyle and the king you're playing. Use rainbow cards to your advantage. The Rainbow Army is currently the only special king in the game, and its cards come with incredibly powerful effects. This king is guaranteed to appear once per standard run, and its cards also have a chance to show up in every shop. Defeating the Rainbow King allows you to acquire a special card, and trust me, they can change the entire game. Its deck is packed with tomes that offer massive short and long-term advantages. One of my personal favorites is the Shrine. It spends 9 gold every year to level up 1 random plot and costs 3 gold less per level. Sounds strong, right? Also, with 2 overwork decrees, it levels up 3 plots up to 5 plots every year. And since the Shrine upgrade itself, you only need 1, and it'll hit level 3 in no time. Another standout is the Temple. It boosts 10% of a random stat on a random plot. At level 3, combined with double overwork, that's a 50% stat boost every year. And for the math nerds, because it applies 5 times at 10%, the real boost is actually 61%. There are some cards that don't look very strong at first glance, so they often get ignored in most runs. But here's the thing, some of these cards can become game changers when used correctly. Take Mycelium for example. At first its effect doesn't seem impressive. Summons a fighting spore every 9 seconds in battle. Sounds slow and weak, right? But the spores actually accumulate across battles. This means if you're running a very defensive build and your fights drag on, by the late game you will have an entire army of spores ready to overwhelm your opponent. So the next time you have a seemingly weak card, don't underestimate it. You might just discover a secret weapon. When I started playing, I immediately enjoyed playing the King of Greed the most. With all his attack speed buffs, he seemed very strong. Seeing a tower attack several billion times per second is simply awesome. So I stuck with him for a long time, until I discovered something surprising. No matter how much attack speed you stack, there's an invisible limit. In other words, attack speed is shadow capped. Here's the best example. The King of Greed's castle ability deals infinite damage to troops, but at a very slow attack speed. In theory, if you push attack speed high enough, this ability should shred any army instantly. With this high attack speed and infinite damage, the battle should be over in less than a second. But that's not the case, and this is already shown at triple game speed. So what's going on? The only explanation is that the game secretly limits attack speed to prevent crashes. Increasing health and damage is just a matter of number scaling, but attack speed is different. It's a visual increase and demands way more processing power. So keep this in mind before you go all in on speed buffs. They're still powerful, but there's a hidden ceiling you simply can't break. Now let's talk about the late game. If you've got a strong run going, tons of buff buildings and everything scaling like crazy, and you're somewhere between year 50 and 99, you might notice something. It can take up to a minute or two just for all the upgrades to apply. At that pace, reaching year 99 can take several hours. Here's the problem. During that time, you could easily complete 3 separate runs to year 33, which would give you way more XP overall. That's why it makes sense to cut down the upgrade time by removing some of those buff buildings. Sure, you might not push as far in a single run, but you will progress faster and avoid the painful wait. At the end of the day, it's all about having fun. Grinding every run to year 99 isn't just inefficient, at least for me, it's not very enjoyable either. If you learned even one new helpful thing in this video, please consider subscribing so that you don't miss out on any future content and we together can reach the next big milestone.